Carnivore Soldier coming at you from Austin, Texas. Today we have episode 3 of the series called Mission Carnivore, where we focus on veterans and first responders and how the carnivore diet has affected them. Today we have a special guest, retired Chief Petty Officer David Saunier from the U.S. Navy. I'm going to bring him in here and let him introduce himself. Hey, David. Can you hear me?
Hey. Good afternoon. Like you said,
all right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, David? Just introduce yourself.
All right. My name's David Saunier, and like Lawrence said, I am retired Navy. I was in the Navy for 20 years, 1987 to 2007, and then I also worked for DOD for quite a few years until maybe about 2 years ago. I worked for Department of the Navy as a civilian. I was hired as a physical scientist for the Navy and did a lot of hydrographic work with them, and as also for the Corps of Engineers. I did a lot of hydrographic work for them, and retired about 2 years ago, getting close to 2 years. I did the minimum amount of time that I needed to do, and I decided to take an early retirement. But anyway, like a little bit about myself. I mean, I grew up in South Louisiana, grew up in a small town outside of Lafayette, Louisiana, just to the north of Lafayette, and I'm a child of the 60s and 70s. You know, I grew up playing from dusk till dawn, pretty much. You know, after school, we rushed home, did our homework, got on our bikes, pedaled all over the neighborhood. You know, your typical lifestyle of the 60s and 70s. There was no video games or anything like that. So you didn't, I mean, we weren't even allowed in the house if the sun was out and it was nice weather. We you know, my mom was adamant about us staying outside and playing. So yeah, I was, you know, 60s and 70s. I had a great childhood. My dad had a small farm, so we ate really well. I mean, we had a lot of beef, a lot of poultry, and then he was also really into cast netting. And we had a Rockefeller Refuge, was not too far away from us, so my dad would go cast netting and catch, you know, a big ice chest full of shrimp. You know, any chance he got. So we ate plenty of seafood. And my dad worked offshore, so he worked in the oil and gas industry all his life. And he would come home from his little stints and he'd have all kinds of fish and stuff like that he'd bring home from, I don't know where he got it. Sometimes I think they may have been fishing off of some of these rigs, or he'd pick it up at the docks from some of these fishermen coming in, but he'd usually bring in quite a bit of fish. So I was really lucky. We ate really well. And you've mentioned it before, but back then there was no fat kids. Everybody was skinny. And I was even looking at photos of myself from when I was a little kid into my teenage years, and we were all lean and skinny. Now, I did eat junk food. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I ate a lot of fish, you know, beef, butter. We ate a lot of good food, but we also ate some junk food. And I guess, you know, we were just so young, but we didn't eat a lot of it. You know, we didn't. My mom was real strict about, you know, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so dad was working, mom was at home, and she kind of kept that pantry locked up tight. So, you know, you ate lunch, you went play, came back a couple hours later, you might have been hungry, and she might have gave you a little bit of a snack, but it wasn't like just on demand like I see it going on now. But yeah, I had a really good childhood growing up, and then high school. I played a lot of sports. I didn't play football, but I played baseball, some basketball early. So, and I was really active. Plus, we had 2 big empty lots next to where I lived. And so there was a lot of pickup football, pickup games of baseball. It was just nonstop out there. I started lifting weights in high school. So got a little bit more muscular, but I was still a pretty lean guy. Worked for the fire department. I joined the fire department right out of high school, pretty much. And they were pretty health conscious. You know, they had every fire station had a weight room. I continued playing baseball, more like softball once I was with the fire department, but I was very active, you know. And then I joined the Navy in '87 and continued on staying in pretty good shape, you know, throughout most of my naval career. Actually, I was in pretty good shape. It wasn't until like around the late 90s, I went in for a checkup, and there was a physician's assistant came back in and said, "Hey, your triglycerides are through the roof." And I didn't even know what triglycerides were at the time, you know.
None of us did.
I want to say it was close to 700. You know,
Wow.
I need to look it up, but it was really high. And I remember when I looked at them and I looked at what normal was, it was way beyond that. And she was real concerned about that. And she didn't prescribe a statin or anything, but she just said, you need to lose some weight. Now, I didn't think I was overweight, but I did have a, like, that beer belly. I call it the dad gut, by that point I was married and I had a couple of kids, but I was still running quite a bit in the Navy. We do these twice a year PTs. So I would run often enough to be able to pass them, but I wasn't that active, but I was still lifting weights. But anyway, there was something called the Sugar Busters diet back then. It was actually written by a bunch of doctors in the New Orleans area. I had got that book eliminated, and basically you eliminated sugar out your diet. You pretty much ate almost everything except something with a lot of sugar. So I did cut down on bread, added sugar, Cokes, that kind of stuff. Beer, cut my beers way back. And I did. I lost quite a bit of weight. And after a couple of return visits, my triglycerides were normal. Everything was pretty good. I probably went from about 185 to about 170, then, that was the
Wow.
lightest I had weighed in the Navy, I think. And then I just kind of stayed on that diet. And then I kind of was more Mediterranean diet based too. I was eating a lot of meat, olive oil, salads. I was trying to just try to continue it on. And then it was probably when I was around 2002. I was 5 years from retirement. Went in for a checkup and I had high cholesterol. Never had high cholesterol problems then, but the cholesterol was up. And the doctor, of course, obviously, statins. Went, take statins. So I took statins and I started actually trying to watch my diet. But no matter what I did, my LDL, my total cholesterol and LDL seemed to stay up no matter how much statins I took, Not excessively high, but I'd say like my LDL was maybe 110, which to him was kind of high. My total cholesterol was probably 250, which to him was kind of high. And throughout the rest of my Navy career, from 2002 until I retired, I was on statins. And I was constantly kind of watching my weight, which is hard to do because I mean, during that time, you were like less calories, more working out, or that the old paradigm was eat less, exercise more.
Yeah.
But
Calories in, calories out.
it
It's a myth.
sounds easy, but when you're
Yeah.
exercising a lot, you're hungry.
Yeah.
It's especially if you're eating, lean this, lean that, low fat this, low fat that. You're not getting that fat. And I think I was probably fell into that trap, So I found I was just walking around hungry all the time. And but in the back of my mind, well, I'm doing it for a good cause. I'm I'm
Yeah.
trying to stay healthy,
I used to say that when I was walking around hungry, because I've done those starvation diets and they're terrible idea. And I used to think that when I'm hungry, that's how losing weight feels. That's what I used to think. This is what I'm supposed to feel like when I'm losing weight. And
Right.
that's like I used to tell myself that's a positive thing because I'm actually losing weight. But I mean, after being on this thing for 6 months, I never have to be hungry. It's amazing. And I just slim way down.
Yeah. Now, like I got out the Navy and, once you're out the Navy, you don't have to PT anymore.
Right.
You don't have to watch your weight anymore. So my weight, there was a slow creep up.
Yeah.
And just to not make it too long, by about a year ago, I was probably about maybe a year and a half or so ago, I went to the VA. My weight was like 215, 214 or 215. I had never weighed that much. And I was stunned because I hadn't weighed myself hardly at all. I didn't even have a scale at home. But I had noticed that my shorts were it was like my pants were getting really hard to button. Things were getting tight. And my gut seemed a lot bigger. My face was fat. Man, I sent you some photos.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I noticed. I was looking at a photo of myself and I said, look how fat my face is. It didn't even dawn on me that I was that overweight. But for a 5'8" guy, 215 pounds is heavy.
Yeah.
Especially when most of it's in your gut. Because if you looked at like my shoulders, arms, my legs, everything looked, okay. But it was just that gut area. That skinny inside, fat, what is it? Fat inside, skinny outside kind of thing.
Yeah.
FISO. Anyway, plus my cholesterol was a lot higher too. But my triglycerides were still not that bad, and my LDL was still not that bad, but I was just overweight, you know.
So,
So I had many years ago, I was an avid cyclist. And this was even before I joined the Navy. I did a lot of cycling and I really liked it. I was getting pretty good at it. I was kind of starting to mess around with racing, but then I joined the Navy, so everything got pushed off to the side. But anyway, I started cycling again, and I knew I could burn a lot of calories cycling. And I started watching my diet. I started watching what I ate, cutting down on junk food, especially sugar. I lost a little bit of weight, not a lot, and I was surprised. I'm like, man, I'm doing I was doing well over 200 miles a week, and it just seemed like the weight wasn't coming off, you know. But I was hungry, of course, so I was eating a lot of pasta, you know, a lot of grains, a lot of bread,
carb
oatmeal.
loading,
I
right?
was still carb loading, and I was a kind
Yeah.
of a bit of a proponent of that because I had read Tim Noakes' book years ago.
Right. Yeah.
He was the founding father of the carbing up.
Yep.
He isn't anymore.
He
Matter of
ripped
fact,
the chapters out and republished it.
yeah, and everything else in his book was fantastic, except the
Right.
diet part. He admits now he got it wrong. But anyway,
Good for him. Right.
I started looking. I'm always on YouTube, and one day I just did a search for. I was thinking it was either weight loss or whatever, but I came across a video. The very first video I came across was Dr. Berg, and it was on keto.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reading about keto, and that started the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You see all these suggested ones, and it started Kent Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Ken Berry, and then I came across the ones that really helped me out to get me really going was the Low Carb Down Under series.
With Dr. Chafee.
He was on there, and there was a Dr. Paul Mason was one of the presenters.
Right. Oh, that guy's great.
He did an excellent presentation on LDL.
Yes.
And how a guy got denied from insurance. Well, I really got hooked on this whole thing. I saw Dr. Jordan Peterson's interview about him being on the carnivore diet, and I said, okay, I'm gonna start this. This was in January of 2020, January 2023. So just a few months ago, I was probably about 209 in January, 207. And I said, all right, I'm going to give keto a try. I like meat. I mean, I love meat. I said, all I got to do is cut out grains and a lot of vegetables, eat a little bit of vegetables. But toward the end of January, I started watching more and more carnivore videos, and especially Dr. Chafee and Dr. Baker. I'm like, you know what? Hell with this, man. I'm just going to start eating meat, dropping especially I saw the thing about plants are trying to kill you, which I love that presentation that he did. That was Dr. Chafee. So I just went full on carnivore, and man, the weight just came off.
Yeah. Amazing.
And my blood pressure, that was another thing. My blood pressure, I didn't mention this early, but a few months ago, my blood pressure was kind of high. It was like 130, 140 over 90, when I went to the VA office that first time. And man, my blood pressure now, it just started plummeting. Now my blood pressure is usually like 110 over 65, somewhere around there, 100, sometimes even like 100, 105 over 65 or 60. It's just incredible. My resting heart rate's dropped a lot. But, the main reasons I really wanted to go carnivore after a while was like, not only to lose weight, but for me, I watched my mom just die slowly with Alzheimer's.
Mine too.
Alzheimer's. And it was a sad thing to watch.
Mine died in 2017. Yeah, same thing. It was a terrible death.
It took 10 years. We started noticing when we started noticing it, it took about a 10-year, 12-year period before she finally passed away. Luckily, my dad didn't need to put her in a nursing home. He kept her at home, and he just hired a staff of people to take care of her and help him, because my dad's 96 right now, and My mom died at 94, I think. So yeah, I mean, she lived a long life, but in the end, it was dementia, Alzheimer's that really just blanked her out, and it was sad to watch. And
yeah,
I know that her diet was a big reason for it. And
yep, my mom too.
was like, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my brain operates at its full capacity and feed it properly. So that was one of the main reasons. It was, I want to. I'm also kind of had quite a few friends in the past year that have died of cancer. They're retired. Two people I know really well retired from the Corps of Engineers, and within the first year they were dead of cancer. And
it's amazing.
It's just sad to when you think about it. There's no way I wanted to be a victim of that as well. So I've watched plenty of videos to know that there is something about glucose and cancer cells. Let me not feed cancer cells the things they like excessive amounts of sugar and carbohydrates, seed oils, things that'll damage my mitochondria.
Yeah, that's in addition to the fueling of it is the damaging of the mitochondria, which actually triggers it, right? I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, they're
you got those two going on.
Yeah, they're looking for a way to propagate, and they're like, they're looking for damaged mitochondria. They're looking for that high carbohydrate, that high glucose, so that they can, make their fuel. So it makes a lot of sense. And I've seen quite a few videos from some very esteemed doctors that have been doing research on this. And there's, and it's not a new concept. Apparently, like decades ago, there was plenty of research showing that, hey man, we can starve cancer.
In the 1920s. In the 1920s, there were the rat studies, and all that knowledge seemed to get, I don't know if you've seen Fat, a documentary, but if you haven't, go check it out. I did a movie review on my channel.
I saw that.
I recommend it, and there's links to watch it for free. If you're a viewer and haven't seen it yet, go watch that, because he's absolutely right. In the 1920s, they actually did full, real hard science research on rats that had cancer and feeding them glucose. And they didn't even think that glucose was going to be the issue, but it turned out that it was. It just feeds it and kills the rats quickly. And the other rats, I think, lived, several hundred times longer than the ones that died. So it's pretty amazing. You're right, though. And then all that knowledge got lost during the Depression and World War II, when everyone was just trying to survive. They didn't care about health. They just cared about living a day, right, to the next day. And then the 50s hit, and everyone had an abundance of food and money and everything, and no one even worried about health because everyone was fit. So I think that just got lost.
Yeah, that fascinates me. As a matter of fact, I was watching a lot of videos by Dr. Thomas Seyfried. I think he's done a lot of research on this, and it's just amazing how, the answer, it seems to be right there, and everybody just wants to revert to drugs and chemotherapy and radiation therapy. I mean, these are some dangerous things to put your body through in the first place. Why don't we just couple? We can also couple diet with that if we need to, and that's what Seyfried is kind of a proponent of. But
that's because obviously Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex, but he didn't warn us of the food industrial complex and the pharmacological industrial complex that are very strong and very live, and they're training all our physicians. Everything the physicians learn is from them. So they're setting them up to be pill pushers in a cartel, unfortunately. And I don't think doctors ever plan to do that. They come in, they want to help people. And a lot of them you see get disillusioned until they find something like this where they can actually change people, like Tim Noakes and these guys actually change people's health. It's amazing. And it's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah. And like I said, when you first start watching a lot of these YouTube videos, like my wife was real concerned. He goes like, I don't know if this is good. But I'm like, look, I'm losing a lot of weight. My blood pressure is plummeting. And, like my gut is gone. I mean, I'm starting to show signs of a six-pack, which
Me too.
I haven't had that since I was like a junior in high school.
Reverting back to my college days, for sure.
It's incredible. Like this morning, I weighed about 174. And I'm doing things on my bike I wouldn't have thought I would be able to do at this age.
That's great, man.
Yeah, and I'm verifying this. It's not only just regular YouTubers, but when you start watching people like Dr. Ovadia, cardiologist, Dr. Tim Noakes, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Dr. Paul Mason, and then Dr. Nadir Ali. These are cardiologists who are big proponents of keto-based eating, carnivore-based eating. And then there's a new doctor that I found. I think I sent you a link, Dr. Pradip
Yeah, that was
Jamnadas.
excellent. I watched both his videos. They were excellent.
Yeah,
the sugar one, the bittersweet one, and they're both great. Yeah,
they're both great. And he is he even mentions, like, he knows eating keto will work. He doesn't exactly endorse it, because the reason he doesn't endorse it is because it says it's a very difficult diet to stick to. He does endorse nearly everything else we are big proponents of. Animal-based type diet with a lot of whole foods. A little bit of grain, like very little grain, but his big thing is, which I really locked onto, was the only thing I'm really worried about on the blood test is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. If that thing is under 2, you're doing good. Now, at worst, mine in January, when I had taken my blood test, well, I was at the end of January. I had been on carnivore maybe a week or two, couple of weeks. Things hadn't really settled in. My triglycerides were probably about 140. My HDL was in the upper 60s, because my ratio was about 2.2, 2.1, 2.2. Not great, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. A couple of months later, I did another test. My ratio's down to 1.5. That was like in March. I wish I had the results of those, because I was pretty shocked. My triglycerides were like 90, 80.
Yeah.
And my HDL was like around 70, I think. My LDL was pretty high. My LDL was close to 200, I think.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, 200? I'm like, yeah, but my ratio is great. But yeah, I'm going to actually next month in October, I'm scheduled for another VA blood test. I paid for the other one just out of pocket. I just scheduled myself a blood test, and they got the results online. I had looked at them, and I was like, wow, that's pretty good. After a couple of months, things are plummeting. So I'm very curious to see what, 10 months of, almost all carnivore type eating with really hardly any cheating. I mean, I might have went to a party and somebody was serving cake and I had a bite, small, very small piece of cake.
Yeah, that's
And
incidental.
a few months ago, we had a meeting somewhere, and there was a bunch of chocolate chip cookies. I think I ate one. It's nothing that, nothing that. It was so minimal that I could, can say, look, it was just a blip on the radar screen. I mean, everything I'm eating, I'm eating. I'm pretty much pure carnivore, except for a few grams of lactose with my coffee, a little bit of half and half when I can't get just whole heavy cream. But yeah, I mean, my initial experiences, starting carnivore, actually starting keto, I was probably keto for a couple of weeks and I just went carnivore, but it was easy to transition to for me, because I'm pretty much meat's my favorite food. Bacon, I love bacon, I love eggs. So that was great. It was easy to transition to. I didn't have too big of an issue with wanting to get carbs, like sugar, like, man, I really want some cookies, or I really want a piece of pie. I was just kind of locked in, man. I wanted to, stick with it. I didn't have too big of a digestive issue transitioning to a high fat type. I did have a little bit of diarrhea maybe for the first week, but it was not that bad. And then now it's even, man, like no gas, no bloating.
It's amazing.
And I never pass gas. It's just amazing. I've not had constipation, but then I'm only having bowel movements like every 3, 4, 5 days, and
Me too. Normal.
And it's not a big, nothing major,
right.
But most of your food, because you're eating just meat and fat, it's nearly all being absorbed, and there's very little waste, plus there's no fiber. I mean, I haven't eaten a fruit since last January. I mean, literally no fruit. I can't think of a single fruit I've eaten.
Me neither. And I don't miss it. I mean, at first I thought I would, but I really don't.
Even Dr. Pradip, he talks about fruit. He says, look, the most fruit you should be eating is maybe 2 pieces of fruit during the week. That's enough.
Yeah,
See,
didn't he say that animals ate fruit before hibernation? I think he might have said in his video.
yeah,
That
and
was him,
I've
right?
seen that many people, like, a lot of animals like bears during the wintertime, we would just stock up, start eating a lot of fruit, things like that, that fructose would add some fat to you so that when you went into hibernation or during the cold months, you had that extra fat. But like he says, for humans,
Yeah,
there is no wintertime anymore. You
yeah,
you can go to the store, like nothing, like he jokes around. He goes for there's no winter anymore because there really isn't. If, during the wintertime, it's no different than the summertime. You can go store, buy all the fruit you want, buy all the meat you want.
yeah.
There's plenty of mastodons at the supermarket. You get all the meat you want anytime you want. So there's no reason to fatten up during the wintertime. You know, but he's got some great videos. Matter of fact, there's a whole series on him that I think it's the Galen Foundation. He's a speaker on just about all of their videos. I'm gonna probably try to watch quite a few of those. But
I'll put some links in the description of this video here because I really like those. To put the bittersweet one and the other one you shared with me
yeah,
down there, so he'll be on there, so people get exposed. So I think he's really good. They're long format, but they're
yeah,
really good. They're really well done.
He's got a good sense of humor too, and he's
Yeah,
not dry. He's
yeah,
he gets
entertaining. It's
yeah,
edutainment, right?
yeah. Now, physical health wise, I'm doing excellent. Like I said, all of my clothes are loose on me now. I have to go buy new clothes. I mean, I was wearing like an extra large shirt. I'm wearing mediums pretty much now. My wife works for a clothing in the clothing industry, and
Oh, cool.
she gets all my clothes for for pennies on the dollar. But anyway, she's been swapping a lot of my shirts and things like that. I had to buy a new suit the other day. We went somewhere that required a suit. My old suit was floating on me. I didn't have any time to get it, so I just went and had to buy a size, like 2 sizes smaller. But yeah, I feel great. Like I remember I had some issues with bursitis that I don't have anymore. My health wise, of course, like aerobically, I'm doing really well. I'm in great shape physically for riding. I have zero issues on the bike keeping up with anybody. I don't run anymore.
Yeah.
It's just kind of I never did like running, and the whole time I was in the military, I was like, man, I can't wait to get out so I can stop running because it's that pounding, man. You know, on your
I
knees
just do
and your
sprints
ankles.
because sprints are short and they don't beat me
You
up.
know, it's funny you mentioned that. When I usually once or twice a week, I incorporate sprints on my bike.
Yeah.
I do intervals on my bike where I will just go out full blast for about 30 seconds to a minute till I just can't go anymore, pretty much. And then you cycle down and get your heart rate back down, and then you do another one. You do like maybe 10 to 15 reps of that. And today, matter of fact, this morning I did a short ride where it was just all sprint work on this hill. Go up a hill as hard as I could, got my heart rate just soaring, legs burning, and then get to the top of the hill. I'd make the round around the back neighborhood to get to the bottom of the hill, do it all again. I think I did 10 sprints and then called it a day and headed back. My legs are just worn out right now. So,
I don't
but
know
yeah,
about you. I don't know about you, but it's the first time since the 90s that I've felt athletic when I do something. Like
yeah,
I even when I was doing PT tests in the 2000s, I didn't feel like I was athletic. I felt like I was just getting through them,
right.
like slogging. And now when I go out and sprint, I feel like I'm back in college again, like I'm on the field running. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there was other issues I had, like mentally. I was always prone to these really bad anxiety issues, especially the second half of my naval career. A lot of anxiety issues, and when stress and anxiety, you go through a lot of stress. Sometimes anxiety follows, but I was finding it just hard to deal with stress, and it resulted in a lot of anxiety and trouble sleeping and waking up really early, and that's kind of resolved itself. But some of that, I wonder if it's partly due to retirement too, where I'm just, you know, I'm fully retired now too. So some of that is I'm not in a work environment anymore. I'm kind of doing my own thing. But I did notice that there was a big reduction in anxiety over the past few months. But for me, mostly it's the aches and pains that seem to have gone away. My lower back, which I always thought was just starting to go out on me, I
Yeah.
haven't had any issues with my lower back. Like it seems like that's just completely gone away. I want to say that's probably the biggest physical change of the things that ached was lower back. For the longest time, I thought my lower back was just about to go out. I'm like, well, it's just, your lower back from years and years of wear and tear.
Yep.
But
Me too.
like my lower back it's never sore. And I
Yeah.
was like, it just, that
Never.
is an amazing, that I used to have a lot of bursitis in my elbows here, actually both elbows. And I haven't had any bouts of that in months.
Wow.
And I'm not taking Advil. I'm not taking any kind of over the counter anti-inflammatories or anything like that, So, and it could be a couple of things like, you lose a lot of weight, maybe that, but inflammation wise, I know I'm not eating anything that causes a lot of inflammation. I'm just eating pretty much meat, eggs, bacon, a little bit of chicken here and there. I like dark meat. So, I mean, every now and then I'll cook leg quarters. I eat a little bit of pork,
Yeah.
but mostly ground meat, mostly steaks. I do love fish. So, I mean, once in a while I'll eat salmon or I'll eat redfish from the Gulf, tuna. We get a lot of tuna out here, shrimp, crab, crawfish. Crawfish is it's over here, man. I mean, crawfish is a big time food here,
Oh, I know.
especially,
I miss that when I was in Louisiana for sure. I used to live in
yeah.
Louisiana too. I think we talked earlier,
Yep.
in Baton Rouge area and just north in St. Francisville. So I'm used to your food because I was there for like 5 years, I think. So
When
I got used to that good food.
you mentioned St. Francisville, every Wednesday, a group of us, we drive out to St. Francisville and we bike out there with another group from Baton Rouge. And we bike that St. Francisville area all the way to Jackson, Louisiana, or right up to the Mississippi border. We do about 50, 55, sometimes 60 miles, depending on the weather. And man, it's beautiful up there, man.
Oh, yeah.
The hills, it's great. So that's one of my highlights of the week.
Nice.
Hey, my mental health issues are dramatically improved. I'm kind of lucky. I was able to get through the 20 years of service after 9/11 without any kind of harsh deployments. Although I was deployed a lot, I wasn't on the ground like a lot of people were. So I was kind of lucky that I didn't have a lot of the issues, although the deployments took its toll on me.
Right.
Especially the last couple of deployments where we were out in West Africa in some very harsh areas, malaria infested jungles, dealing with people it was kind of some scary situations, but we weren't in combat or anything, but it was just extremely stressful. And by the time my 20 years was up, it was time to go, man.
Yeah.
It was time. My kids were in high school, so I was like, I'm not dead yet. There's a lot of my friends that were killed, that a lot of people I knew had combat casualties or just mental casualties from deployments out there, And I was like, Everything's good right now. It's time to go. So I left.
Did you encounter any high suicide rate where you're out there
Yes.
with your, yeah. So I have too.
We had one of the most shocking it was a young chief who retired. I really liked her. She was a really good chief. She ran our PT program. She was in such great shape too. But she retired, and not within a couple of months, it was suicide.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Just stunned that happened. And we had a young sailor commit suicide at one of the commands I was at. And then you were just constantly hearing about it. Other sailors at the base. It happens to a lot. I noticed it happened to a lot of people that get out and then suicide pops up afterwards.
That's a
I'm
trigger.
thinking like, yeah, you lose that camaraderie. You're out there by yourself. You're not with that group of friends you were with, and you feel like you're all alone. And next thing you know, and that's what I think happened to one of the chiefs that had retired.
Yeah, the triggers they found in the Army, because they did a study on it. And one of the things that's surprising is deployments are they don't correlate to suicide. A lot of, actually more servicemen who don't deploy commit suicide than the ones that do. But the things they do find that do correlate is relationship issues, money issues, legal issues, and then of course self-medication and separation, like retirement or leaving the service. Because you're part of this high-speed team. You're a valued member, right? And you go from that to looking for a job or going to whatever you do afterwards. And you are on your own, man. You get a 2-week course of how to do a resume and how to interview for a job, and good luck, man. Check your VA for your, benefits.
Yeah, that was called TAP, transition and
yeah, I did.
transition and
I
TAP
forget.
class. You know, you get your
Yeah,
free.
tap class.
Yeah. Anyway, I went through that twice, but yeah, they give you really 2 times you can do it. But it was a little mini vacation. Somehow my marriage survived it. I got married in '87, the year I joined the Navy. Still
That's great.
married. The missus just told me we're going to run some errands. But we have been married about 36 years now, and
Congrats.
two Navy brats that followed us around. My daughter married a Navy. My daughter married an MA who recently got out, and he's actually got hired by the VA. She has a little boy, so we have a grandson. And my son, I had sent you a photo of my last day in the Navy.
Wait, that's your son with you? Yeah.
My son, that little kid that's in there, a real sad-looking little kid. Okay, I don't know. I always joke around with him. I said, "Well, why'd you have to look so miserable in that photo?" Anyway, he's doing well. He's in the Air Force. He's a sergeant. He's deployed right now in Okinawa. He's in an arduous deployment, Okinawa. But I always joke around with the Air Force deployments.
Air Force. Yeah, they got it made.
Said camaraderie. You know, I don't know. I love the Air Force because I tell a lot of I actually pushed him to the Air Force. I said, man, just join the Air Force, you know. But he's doing really well. You know, he's with an F-15 squadron, does support for the aircraft. He loves it. You know, he's doing really well. He's probably going to pick up 6 pretty soon.
That's great.
He recently married. He seems to be doing well.
Hey, so on the mental health front, can you reflect back to when you were doing these exercises before you went carnivore and you were not getting results, and how your mental health was then? Like, what was your outlook on life? Like, I don't know about you, but my body stopped responding to exercise too like it used to, because I was an athlete my whole life and I was used to working out and getting certain results, and then it stopped. And I thought, well, this is just part of getting old. I guess this is the way it is. I guess I'm just going to go a downward slope from here until I get to where my dad is, you know, if I'm lucky. And I just kind of accepted it. But then after this, I can tell you my whole optimism changed, my planning. I mean, everything about my mental outlook changed. It was radical. So I want to know, did you experience something like that too? Or is it just me?
You know, I always wonder, like, had I been eating like this when I was in the Navy, say after, I mean, either the whole time I was in the Navy or at least for the halfway point when 9/11 happened, had I been eating this way, I always wonder, like, what would my career have looked like? You know,
Me too.
That's what I kind of wonder, because I have, my confidence level is so much, and I don't know, my focus is so much better now. I'm so much more healthier. I keep wondering, just, you know, what I would have done different had I, you know, would I have, I'm thinking, like, the main reason I got out was I felt like I was just mentally and physically exhausted from being in, you know.
Me too. And that's when I got out.
That was part of it. I just, you know, I was never like really that out of shape though when I was in the Navy. Matter of fact, the last command I was at before I retired, they were very PT oriented. So, you know, we were like, they were saying, hey, our day starts at 7, you know, 7 to 8 o'clock is PT, and then shower and go to work after that. So it was great. They pretty much factored in PT during the workday. Like, you didn't have to go before or after work, you know. So we, you know, 3 days a week we could PT, and the other 2 was optional. If you wanted a PT, go ahead. Our commanding officer was a big proponent, and like, I don't care what time you come to work, but a PT first. Like, you got it.
That's so nice.
You know, we were all PTing pretty regularly, which was good. That was a good way to end my 20 years, was to be in decent shape when I got out, you know. Yeah,
you look good in the picture. That was your last day, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I kind of surprised myself when I saw that pic. I was like, man, I was not overweight then.
I mean, that was my deal when I got my 20-year letter. I had actually planned to stay in and go on another deployment. There was another deployment coming up, and I was like, I'm just going to stay in and help the division and help the young soldiers get up to speed, you know. But I got burned out, like, on the workup to that deployment, and I had that letter in my back pocket, and I'm like, man, I just can't do it. And so I dropped my letter. I'm like, I'm retiring. Sorry guys, I'm not going to do this. And my mind was burned out. It was done.
You know,
that was 2019.
For me, it was the deployment. I was always fine during the deployment. You know, it was before the deployment, anxiety, stress.
That's the workup. That's what I. That's why I
the workup prior to deployment. I mean, I was like not sleeping. But during the deployment, everything seemed to be fine.
Yeah.
The worst part was after deployment, when things, things are, you get back home, things wind down, and then it hits you. You
Yeah.
know, the anxiety. It was, for me. It was always just these massive anxiety bouts. And I'm thinking, why am I feeling like this? The deployment's over. It seemed like I'd have been having these anxious bouts while I was deployed, but no, you were just go, 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 go. Working,
Yeah.
18-hour days, and you're just working until you're exhausted. You go to Iraq and sleep a little bit, get up and do it all again. I guess you just don't have time to feel it. When you get
No,
home.
I remember being on the submarine when I was in the Navy. Once they cast the lines off, and once we closed the hatches and dove, it was like you were in a different world. Everything went away from the outside, and all you're doing was the task at hand
Yeah,
for the next whatever days you were on
yeah,
mission, right?
yeah,
And it was kind of a relief because everything is off your shoulders. You're just doing your job. You don't have to worry about home stuff or anything. And
yeah,
it was, for me, it was when they closed the hatch and we dove and the mission began. That was okay. We're in a groove. Same if you deploy, to any remote area. Same thing when you get into a fob or something. You get your battle rhythm. We call it in the Army, where you just get going, and that's your
yeah.
battle rhythm, and then you just focus on that. But the workup, oh my gosh! And then afterwards, like you said, the workup and afterwards the hardest part. And I think, that's probably where we get most of our suicides too.
Yeah.
It's during those periods. So
Yeah, that's what I would notice too. It wasn't so much on deployment. Things happened after deployment when things cooled
yeah,
down, and some people would actually get out. Get out. That's when you saw the suicides. It's just
yeah,
amazing, and they've got to figure out a way to get a grip on this. Because it seems like there's a lot of suicides
there is.
in the military throughout the
So
branches, not only
So
Navy.
before the VA happened, all they did was record in service suicides, right? So like from World War I on, and you can look at the history, you can look it up. There was a study done in JAMA I shared with Dr. Chafee. In World War II, it was 5 suicides per 100,000 active duty, and then by Vietnam it had gotten up to 17 per 100,000, and now it's between 20 and 29, depending what year,
Yeah.
per 100,000. It's going up. But one of my theory that I shared with Dr. Chafee is that, guess what got introduced in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? 80s especially, when it got introduced, was the low fat, high carb diets, and all the processed foods went
Yeah.
gangbusters. I mean, they were there in a smaller effect in the 60s, like when you and I grew up. Like when I had salad dressing, my mom made it with buttermilk, right? And she seasoned
Right.
it or whatever. We didn't have seed oil salad dressing. We didn't have seed oil everything, because everything's got seed oils now and sugar in it. And it wasn't like that when they went low fat in, I think that was late 70s, was the Warren Commission or something, I forget. Anyway, when they came out to low fat, all the sugar got dumped into the food, and that's when you can see the graph go up. So I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think there
I remember
is
my mom, funny about these seed oils. I remember I was in high school and maybe even into the early 80s. I remember we had all of these, I called it the fake butters. We had margarine,
yeah,
we had like,
parquet.
yeah, like Parquet and Country Crock and all of
Yeah,
these. I remember kept telling my Mom, why are you buying this? I was like, I don't really like this. And she was like, oh, it's a lot healthier than butter. I'm like, oh, okay. But I kind of missed butter because I grew up eating a lot of butter, but at some point we switched to these vegetable oil butter flavored things. And I never did like that as much,
no,
but that's what you were just told. My mom was trying to feed us as keep us healthy. So she see on the news, oh, you got to get away from butter and all these meats. You got to. So my mom was trying to keep us healthy. She was just
sure.
doing what the government was insisting that we eat. And but man, like
Even
on
though
the
it had
about
no
food,
scientific facts behind it, no facts, no, it was all just
yeah,
opinion. Yeah, it
yeah,
was
I've
really
read a lot
terrible.
about Nina Teicholz's book and just a
Yep.
lot of the interviews. Man, we
Ansel
got
Keys.
played a number. This guy Ansel Keys really did play a number on us, man. And the government just got on board with it. And once the government's on board with something, they're not turning around. Can
They
you
still
imagine
aren't.
if tomorrow somehow the federal government said, "Hey, we've been wrong all these
Yeah.
years. We want you to stop eating all these fruits and vegetables and all of these
Grain.
seed-based oils. We want you to start eating beef, pork, chicken, butter, lard, tallow. Start this immediately." Can you imagine how that would disrupt the economy.
Oh yeah. Well, the pharmaceutical companies would start losing money too because people would stop
Yeah.
needing their drugs. So this
Yeah,
is
and
this is
they say
not going
we
to
figured
happen.
out we've been wrong all this time. This is and it, but like they can't. They're kind of stuck because if they come around and change that, they're kind of acknowledging that they're kind of like, yeah, we were part of the reason why millions of people have died unnecessarily over the past few years, and you got all
Well,
these
beyond
people
that,
looking.
they're paid by the food and drug industries not to counter it. So, they're
Yeah,
proactively being steered away from doing that in addition to having to admit they're wrong. Because they could say, well, back in the 70s, the Warren study or Warren Commission, whatever, those guys made a mistake and we just propagated. That's kind of okay, I get it because we all believed it and you grew up in the same place I did. So I
yeah.
would probably give them the benefit of the doubt, say, okay, you just didn't know, but now you do. So this is
Yeah.
good. But they won't still do it because they're getting paid not to, and
Well,
that's the
there is
problem.
some hope. Nina Teicholz has said that like the AHA has removed their limitation on cholesterol. It's
That's right.
buried. Uh,
2015 they did that.
they're starting to look at keto-based diets. And matter of fact, she was just, there's more and more cardiologists who are just on YouTube. You're seeing more and more cardiologists, people that
Yes.
would know, starting to say, "Hey, look, we're looking at this the wrong way." Hopefully, it's kind of a grassroots. I don't think you'll ever be able to get it from the top down. It's going to have
Yeah.
to be kind of a grassroots where enough people are doing this. There's enough push to get things to slowly change. And like I said, it may take decades before that
Yeah.
paradigm shifts back to where it used to be.
Hopefully we're around to see it. I mean, because
Yeah,
we'll be super healthy, right?
right.
And I tell you, YouTube, for all its faults, is a great platform that has allowed us to do this. Because I would never,
Yeah.
you never would be, we wouldn't be talking
Well,
right now, and
if
we
it
wouldn't
was,
know about it.
I'm open.
So
I'm really worried that at some point, how powerful the food, the
yeah,
drug industry is, the government, they could start clamping down. Hey, look, these carnivore people are messing up things, man. We
well,
got
they
to
have.
clamp down on this.
Did you see the Dr. Berg video? They've
Yeah,
actually, basically saying the World Health Organization is a standard. And if you
yeah.
disagree, then you're just not going to get,
We'll see how
uh,
we'll see what happens with that though.
yeah, you're just not going to get promoted. It's just their filter. They're just going to search engine you. They're going to filter you down to the lower
Yeah,
priority. But that being said, I mean, I do have a Rumble account too. So if anyone here wants to follow me on
yeah.
Rumble, just in case,
Got
because you
an
never
account
know.
there.
And I sync my content here or there. We've seen what's happened to Russell Brand just recently. It can happen.
Yeah, when they
Not
want to
that.
take you out, they'll take you out, man.
Yes, and that's
Hey,
the
you want me to
problem.
tell you a little bit about my sleep?
Yeah. Tell me about your sleep quality because I want to hear about that. Yeah.
Man, okay, so I was diagnosed with sleep apnea a few years ago. I didn't sleep really good for for many years while I was in the Navy. Like anxiety issues. You'd wake up. I wouldn't really sleep that well. And then a few years ago, I guess because of my weight gain too, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. So I was started using a CPAP machine. But one thing I've noticed is I monitor the results. On my little app. My
Hmm.
events, my apnea events per hour, which used to be 2 to 3 per hour, 4 to 5 per hour, they're like point 0.1, point 0.2 events per hour. I am sleeping really well. And most of it's due to the fact that I'm, you know, I, my body is kind of healed up and I'm getting good sleep. The other thing is I've lost a lot of weight. So I have read that when you lose a lot of weight, even when you gain a lot of weight, even your tongue swells up. That's part of the obstruction process of apnea.
Hmm.
Now I've lost a lot of weight, so I'm thinking like my tongue is probably shrunk back down to where it needs to be because my apnea events are minimal. Like when I look at my sleeping, I'm sleeping plenty, but the amount of apnea events that are logged it's showing like last night was point 0.2 events per hour. The night before last was point 0.1 an hour. That's in an 8 hour on an 8 hour. That's not even one apnea event for the whole night. I'm having point 0.1 events. Um, when I was scanning back at all the way past, it dropped significantly over the past 3 or 4 months, especially after I've lost all that weight. Um, Apnea events are minimal. As a matter of fact, we were talking to my wife a couple of hours ago. I said, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to sleep without my CPAP. And because that the main reason I got diagnosed was she couldn't sleep anymore. I was snoring so much.
Right.
So I said, I want to sleep without it. And if I wake you, you got to wake me up and, let me know if I'm snoring loud, because I have a feeling I'm not really going to be snoring that much anymore. We're going to try that. I'll let you, I'll shoot you an
Yeah,
email.
let me know how that works. I've heard the same from, you hear all these anecdotal stories, but when you get enough of them, then like Jordan Peterson
Then
says,
you got data.
that's a theory. Yeah, it becomes
Yeah.
data, it becomes a theory, right? And you have to
Yeah.
test it.
Yeah.
So we're at the
Anecdotals.
point now where I think carnivore is definitely a strong theory,
Yeah.
a really strong theory. And
Yeah.
we
I
need to
mean,
test it.
I grew up or I was in the Navy. I was working in a field, weather forecasting, oceanography, where you were forced to do a lot of research on things. And I joke around like, it feels like you're doing research again, where I don't know how, if you really call it research, it's more like I'm reading a lot now.
Mhm.
But man, I tell you what, when you start really, I'm going to the library, I'm checking out, I'm trying to find books on cholesterol, on microbiology. I'm trying to, the more I'm reading and the more I'm watching from doctors on YouTube, it's like, man, our diet, this diet recommendation, the food pyramid, man, that thing is wrong, man.
It's upside down
It
for
should
sure.
be, look this one up. I want to say 10, 15 years ago, I found an article in the New York Times called "What If It Was All a Big Fat Lie." You could still find this online. It was a New York Times article. It might have been the New York Post. I can't remember which article it was, but basically the guy was saying that the food pyramid needs to be flipped in the other direction. The things that we're eating the most of is what we probably should be eating the less of. And it was an early look at keto, I think. And I still have that article. I remember I sent this to a few friends of mine. This was, this was many years ago. What if it was a big fat lie? Which,
That's cool.
yeah. So, I mean, people have been discussing this for many years. It's not all of a sudden this happened.
Right.
But
I'd like to do one last thing because we're running out of time here, but I want to give you the floor on this. First off, would you recommend a carnivore diet to other military veterans and first responders, even if you're active duty? And if so, what advice would you give them to get started?
okay, I would say this. If you're going to at least start this, at least go keto and start start with one thing. Get rid of the seed oils. Don't eat any kinds of, mazola, Crisco, all of these vegetable oils. Get the sugar out of your diet, the added sugar. So if you're eating whole foods, if you're eating, if you're going to do anything, at least eat fresh vegetables, a little bit of vegetables, but go heavy on the beef, the chicken, the pork. Like, this is the balanced diet. Don't worry about all the fruits and vegetables. Eat a balance of meat. Your beef, your lamb, your pork, your chicken, fish. Eat all that stuff. Fill up on that, and the good fats like beef tallow, lard, which is what I live on. Stay full on that stuff, and it'll minimize the carbs that you need to take in. But man, for one thing, get off of the seed oils. Try to get off of the grains, and and then stick with the meat and a little bit of vegetables if you have to. But if you really want to get the progress, man, just go carnivore and
Yep.
start slow. Start with keto at least, but definitely knock out those seed oils and get off of the sugar. Um, like, if you're worried about the exercise, I can vouch. I don't carb up prior to any type of long rides. I don't carb during a ride. All I bring along is water. My body is just totally adapted now to run on fat, I think. My friends are kind of amazed. They're sucking down goo, those energy drinks,
Right.
energy bars, all of those high carb, and we stop at a rest, and I'm just sipping on some water and electrolytes sometimes, but I don't eat anything. And I've done 80, 90, 100-mile rides with no carbs. You can do it. You just have to let your body adjust to it slowly. After a few weeks, you'll be fine. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a great diet. It's
Yep.
and it's easy to stick to once. I mean, you just got to give it a chance. Um, and it's very easy. It's so much easier. You're not spending an hour prepping, chopping up vegetables and dicing, and man, you just throw some meat on the grill, throw some meat in the air fryer, ground
Yeah.
some brown meat, man, and like 20 minutes later, you're eating, and you're full. So that's my big advice, really, though, is to give it a chance and to stick with it. Align yourself up with people that are doing it as well. Like in the YouTube community, there's, follow your favorite carnivore.
Yep.
And don't listen to your friends, and try to avoid the situations where you're going to get in a lot of trouble eating. Like it's hard, but you can do it. Like it's almost impossible to go to parties now. You gotta fill up before you go to the party.
That's I have a planning guide. I have a carnivore planning guide people can download from my website on carnivore.
I saw that. I need to check that out.
And in that planning guide, I do talk about going to the holiday parties, because my thing is, even when I'm going on a date with somebody, I will eat 2 or 3 burger patties before I step out the door with butter. Same. And then I'm like, I'm good. They can put cake in front of me. Man, yeah. I don't want none of that. I'm good.
You're stuffed. Exactly. Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, where are we going? Oh man, let me warm up a pound of meat real quick.
It works. Butter on it. So planning makes it, worthwhile. But if you do mess up, which everyone does, it's not the end of the world. Don't beat yourself up. Get on that horse and ride like you never fell, and ride like no one saw you fall off. That's what I like to say.
I think what I like about your channel is you, like I said, you have got a good approach to carnivore. Especially, I think veterans will be able to relate to you.
Thanks.
You've been there, you've done that, and you're proof right there. All the weight you've lost over the past, over the past few months. And some of the stuff you do behind the scenes, like your planning guide, the movie reviews, things like that. Those are really good. I think a lot of vets can relate to that. And like I said, you're walking the walk.
Well, I appreciate it, man. That's great. Well, David, it's been fantastic talking to you. Unfortunately, we have to cut it short. Or actually not even short. We have to cut it because we're at the hour limit. And this is also a podcast. So check out the podcast on Mission Carnivore. Dave, I'm going to let you go right now, but stick around so we can chat afterwards, okay? All right. So if you like this content, please like and subscribe to the channel. Check out the podcast, Mission Carnivore. It's on all the major streamers. And all I got to say is stay strong and overcome. Carnivore Soldier, out.